Hey everybody, welcome to the live. I'm going to link this to my Instagram right now, so people come on. It's going to be 1 second before I get it going, but I'm going to do a YouTube live as well as the Instagram live. Will take 1 second to set up. Want to try this platform instead of the other platform. So it's going to give it 1 minute. Luce, good to have you on. I do know you're Ottoman Turks. We're trying to do the YouTube stream instead of the other stream. I'm going to take just a random selfie real quick. Swipe up for Instagram, YouTube Live. Give it 1 minute. Swipe up to join the stream. And if you want to ask the Q&As here, you are allowed to, Luce, if you want to. I'll answer your questions in the sidebar. But thanks for being on tonight. I'm playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Good for you, Luce. Fun game for sure. I'm going to point this out right here. The Q&A, I think you guys can see the sidebar chat too, so I'm talking about. But good to have you guys on. I'm going to do an evening question and answer. It's October 29th, 2020. Hey, everybody. If you're coming from the Instagram Live, I'm doing a live stream. I'm streaming it on YouTube right now instead of Instagram. It's just a platform that I think is a little different. We should give it a try. So you can go to my link in my bio or swipe up my story if you want to join the live stream. It will be on YouTube this evening instead of Instagram. I want to give that a try. So please head over to the YouTube. You can ask the questions in the sidebar here, like Luce is doing. But yes, we're on the other site now for this evening. I just want to test out a few things. So get to the YouTube. I'll also take questions here, but I'll be on the YouTube app. So I'll see you guys there. Want to talk about a few things. The video is coming up. For you guys who are on Instagram Live, I'm going to put this right here. Check out the stream on YouTube. And I'll pin this. Comment. Oh yeah, so going forward on the YouTube videos, I have a few themes I'm working on. I want to work on the 25 most important Greeks, throw out some names who are a little less known. Obviously, you get Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, but maybe someone like Phidias, Thucydides, Herodotus, who are also very important to Greek civilization, who will get overlooked. Same with Anaxagoras and Anaximander, very important people who get overlooked when it comes to Greek history. So that's one of the videos I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of making another Viking video. Assassin's Creed is coming out, and they're going to be a Viking, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And I've contacted a few people who make Viking music, and we're going to use that in it. So we have a Viking video, we have a Greek history video. I'm thinking about making an allegory of the cave video. I've been working on a script for that, so that's on the horizon. If you feel the need for some vibes afterward, text me, Tom. I'm streaming mixing tonight. That's awesome, Nick. I'd love to see you play some music on the stream. Nice guy Nick is a DJ. It's awesome. He makes some great music. But yes, once again, those who are on the Instagram stream, head over to YouTube. That's where we're doing the stream, the question and answer tonight. Love to see you guys over there. It's on YouTube. It'll be my link in the bio or the swipe up feature in my story. We have more people on there than we do on this stream right now, actually. So make sure you check that out. But what do we got here? So stupidity at its finest. How do you feel about the fall of Pompey? Pompey was a part of the triumvirate. There were 3 men in the triumvirate. There you get tri, T-R-I. And I believe it was Crassus, Julius Caesar, and Pompey. Crassus passes away. There's a power struggle between Pompey and Julius Caesar. Caesar ultimately wins that. So how do I feel about the Pompey fall? I think the fall of Pompey led to the rise of Caesar through might. So very consequential. It turned the empire, the Roman, turned Roman civilization from the Roman Republic into the Roman Empire, which are 2 different periods in Roman history that sometimes get merged together when overlooking Rome. So before that, there were no emperors of Rome during the Roman Republic. Caesar kind of becomes the first quasi-emperor. It's really Augustus Caesar, his adopted son, who will be the first emperor of Rome, and he lived for 40 years as emperor of Rome. So Pompey and the fall of Pompey is one of the most consequential things in ancient Rome. Last time I'm just going to say this, if you're on the stream here, go over to the one on YouTube. That's where we're doing it. I'm going to close up the Instagram app now and focus on the YouTube conversation. Thank you guys for being on. What else do we got here? 47 years, as Azar is pointing out. Yeah, 47 years of rule for Pompey. So definitely a very, very 47 years of rule for Augustus. Very consequential as the power struggle changes. What else do we got here? How did you like the Swiss history? So my guy, Ottoman Turks, Mr. Luce, we had a long DM today. He gave me a great breakdown on Swiss history and the former regions or administrative areas of the Holy Roman Empire, which would go on to merge and create Switzerland, which is a very beloved country today in Europe. They seem to do a lot of things right fiscally and socially. Not too much concerns about Swiss. The guy, the city, I think you're referring to Pompey, the city, the guy, not the city of Pompeii. I have Greek ancestry, but I'm not certain of how far back it goes. But I do have the surname. So I'd imagine to some degree, it's still pretty strong in the family if it has passed down through the father's line for your name. They do the 23andMe, the DNA tests. They'll test your haploid group, which will identify what region that part of your family comes from. And I believe the Greek haploid group is called J2. That is very similar to the people from the Levant, the area of like Israel and other parts of the Mediterranean, but not Italy. Italy is the R1A haploid group, which is with the Northern Europeans, like the Brits, the French, the Germans have the R1A instead of the J2. Yeah, Iberian will have the same R1A haploid group. So what do you think of a scenario where the U.S. is less expansionist and states like Texas, California, Hawaii remain independent until the 20th century? That's a very interesting alternative history question. Texas actually was independent for like a short period of time, the Republic of Texas, right after the Mexican-American War. I guess before it too. So the Americans kind of stuck with the early states acquired, didn't go out too westward. How would it look? They'd probably have a much larger Spanish-speaking population because the Spaniards were the ones who owned that. I am from New York. It was originally owned by the Dutch, but then the British took it over. So the New Yorkers will speak English. Some New Yorkers actually spoke Dutch for a while. Like Martin Van Buren is the only American president not to speak English as a first language. He spoke Dutch, and he's from New York. So you'd have a lot more Spanish speakers in that part of the world. I believe they're called Hables Español, Spanish speakers, or Español Hablantes. Yeah, Español Hablantes, Spanish speakers. So you'd have a lot more Español Hablantes, people who are speaking Spanish natively in those regions, which would make for a different society. Español Hablantes, sorry. My bad for getting that one wrong. But what you would have is there's certain words in the Spanish language that are a lot more familiar and community collective oriented, which might explain how the cultural differences between Spanish speakers and English speakers, or Anglophone, people who speak English. And something interesting is that if you look at a word like amistad, it means friendship. Amigo means friend. Amor means a love. So you say te amo, it means I love you. All those words have the am beginning, which shows like love and affection. And in English, you got friend, friendship, you got love. Like the root between friend and love aren't the same. Where in Spanish, you get the same am, which is common in English. Like amiable, if something's amiable, it's like lovable, or you're enamored. It also shows love, but in the Spanish have a different kind of sense of community and love between the friend and the lover, kind of have that same root. I said amistad and amor both show affection, where in English, friend and love don't have that common root of a word. It's also seen the word reunirse. Reunirse would means to meet. When do you want to meet? When do you want to reunion? in English, you don't have a reunion with someone until you already meet them. Your high school reunion is something that happens 5, 10, 15, 20 years after you graduate and you're coming back together. The concept in the Spanish language is that you could have your first meeting with someone, a reunirse, prior to actually meeting them. So this concept of like you're familiar with each other and who you are and like the spirit of the person before actually meeting them, and you're not really, you reunite the first time you meet someone, shows a bit more shared level of humanity than the Anglophone version of meeting for the first time. So you'd have Texas that probably have a higher percent of language Spanish speakers, and then you have California, would also have a higher percentage of native Spanish speakers of the Hispano-hablante. Now, Hawaii would be its own thing. It'd be a Pacific island, 4,000 kilometers away from continental U.S. They had a monarchy, Queen Lily. I forget her name for a second. I'll look it up. Queen Lily Kalani was, the one who was in charge of Hawaii before it was taken over. It would be a lot more similar to, I guess they have American Samoa too, but it would be something more along the lines of that, like a more independent type Pacific island archipelago. And it would be a drastically culturally different, even though Hawaii does maintain a lot of its cultural roots, which are much different from the mainland United States. It would be a lot more like that. It would be a lot less Americanized and American looking in places where American tourists go, and a lot more of an independent country that may not have developed democracy in the same way because they had a monarchy. They had a certain type of tribal leadership. So that was something like the U.S. could do had they decide to, or Texas and California and Hawaii look like had they not been acquired by the United States of America. Do you think an empire, such as the British Empire, will ever form in the future? Or has society moved away from those forms of living? Good question, Zach. I think what is possible is more of a globalization sense, more of this idea of globalization for a few reasons. The technology is there today. You guys who are watching this right now are not from my home country, America. Maybe some of you are, maybe some of you aren't. But it's 2020. In 1820, there was no way I could broadcast in front of someone from Portugal, someone from South America, someone from Africa. That just wouldn't be possible. So the fact that even my voice can be heard to people from other countries and very easily, as something that was really never done in human history before, definitely shows a more shared sense of humanity. You see something like the European Union, of course, the British left, but that was an effort to consolidate the European power. I think it is more likely. I mean, there'll always be, people who are hungry for power and want to be, get territorial gain. But, and I don't know, as someone just brought up, Parth brought up, like, will there be a world government? I don't know if there'll be a world government, so to say, but stronger understanding of other countries and communication between them is more possible. As I said, it's already kind of blows my mind that what I'm doing now was not done 200 years ago. I wouldn't think too many radios were able to do this 100 years ago if they even had the technology in 1920. So this is something that really, really, really just becomes new in the last 80, 70 years when you have radio, television that can broadcast at that level, and the satellites made even more. And even what we're doing right now is very difficult to do 20 years ago. So with an increase of communication between different countries and different groups of people, I don't necessarily know if there'll be an empire taking over other people as much as there'll be more of a unified world community. Something like the UN does get bashed a good amount because maybe they don't do the right things at times, maybe they're lackluster, but that has stood for a significant period of time now after World War II. And countries do put some level of respect on it. They have their delegates. They go to these meetings. They have this international community that was also really never there before. They had the League of Nations, but that kind of failed. The Concert of Europe was founded, right after Napoleon to have a beginning first type of EU. So things of that nature, of more globalization, seems to be more the trend and path I think humanity is going for than a British Empire. Well, globalization is amazing. I do agree. I agree that half of you guys, probably are in this right now, are not from the United States of America, but you're listening to my voice, and I'm talking to you guys. That is great. What else do we got here? Are you against or for nuclear proliferation? I do not want anyone to use nuclear weapons on each other in any capacity. So I would be against nuclear war and use of any nuclear weapon, human to human. So I'm anti-nuclear weapons. But now we're talking about nuclear energy, which is a different concept as a form of renewable energy, which has seemed to be one of the cleanest and more effective versions of energy. Haven't researched it enough, but I think scientists and energy companies should be doing the research and seeing the possibilities of that. That concept of nuclear kind of scares some people, as you see with some nuclear Chernobyl and Fukushima. Sometimes these nuclear reactors have done some things that have caused damage, and the half-life on these nuclear particles will linger and could have long-term effects on the environment. But it's not something that should be ruled out. So I don't think we should get rid of nuclear energy, but nuclear weapons can go. And then some people, I guess, suppose that if you get rid of any use of nuclear, any application of nuclear energy, then the concept of making weapons into that would also go away. Not my expertise on how world governments view the use of nuclear energy. So Ottoman Turk says, did you know you're technically floating? Is that because the concept that like your atoms never touch another atom? Like I have my phone here, and if I touch that, like it supposedly doesn't. I'm only really feeling like the repelling from this phone to that phone. Can you explain what you mean by I'm technically floating a bit more? Do you have something to say about those who deny the Holocaust? I think a very simple solution to Holocaust deniers is that Germany openly admits to it. They keep places like Auschwitz and Dachau open for you to see, for you to learn about as a form like a museum where the artifacts are there. So if you are to deny such event, you are denying the people who are openly admitting to its existence, who said we took part in this, we created this. Here are our laws, the Nuremberg laws, that set up this way where we could identify who was of what religion, what faith, what creed, what race, and then segment them and then bring them to certain camps. The documents are there. The people who did it admit to themselves, and there are still living survivors who have tattoos of their number there. And the evidence is very strong to support that. And if they deny such, they are probably misinformed on the topic. Have you tried the Minecraft Creeper Crunch cereal yet? I have not. That looks like it'd be really good. So I might look for it next time I go to the grocery store. And then Andre says nuclear power should be more way research and funded. Yes, there should be greater research and funding into it. Looking into it, there seems to be a lot of positives, and if it proves to be correct, then they should definitely fund it a bit more. Once again, Ottoman Turks, Mr. Luce is saying we're technically floating. I'm waiting for an explanation on that one. Tom, do you think a democracy without political parties could work, like making every candidate run as an independent? That is very interesting. Haven't thought about that. That's a good way of posing it. So what used to happen is the Greeks used to have something called an assembly, and they'd have all these men meet in the assembly and just basically vote at the same time. And they weren't really politically aligned. They just kind of heard what the people said, and they'd say yes or no. Could that happen in America today? I think there's too much power between the two parties. For something like that to happen, wouldn't be no political parties, but I think like 10 political parties makes a better sense than that, because coalitions are important. When you have independent candidates, you have a bunch of different views, so it might benefit to have smaller parties. In America today, we only have the Republicans and Democrats. Republicans are considered the conservative party. Democrats are considered left of the Republicans, but on the world scale, they're considered still pretty right, center right, because they don't really have too much left-leaning policies on a world scale. Not too many people are calling for the complete abolition of private property, which is a left-wing ideology. Not too many people are calling for, stripping businesses from people and letting the government own it. There's still a strong respect for the free enterprise and free market from the American left, we'll call them, the American left, which is more centered on a world stage. But yes, within those factions, the Republicans have a few different factions. They have a libertarian faction, which really, really wants liberty, as you hear the name, libertarian, which means hands off from the government, deregulation. They think that certain drugs should be legal. It's not up to the government to say you can or cannot buy it. If someone grows this drug in their backyard, they should be able to hand it off to another person for the exchange of money without the government being involved. That's a libertarian ideology. They also have in the party have a strong Christian faction, which upholds Christian morals, Christian beliefs, and other countries do have specifically religious conservative parties. The Christian Democrats in some nation. So in America, you could claim that the Republicans could split up between a libertarian faction, a Christian faction, and like a Rockefeller Republican. Nelson Rockefeller was the vice president for Gerald Ford, and he had a bit more moderate view, a bit more centered. So this Republican Party that doesn't really care too much about the Christian values and doesn't think that completely the government should be hands out. So you can see three types of parties: a moderate Republican, a libertarian Republican, and a Christian conservative Republican. Similar theory on the left, you'd have the real socialists, the democratic socialists can have their own faction versus the liberals, who are a bit more moderate leaning on that scale, who might want still value free speech very highly, still want the free market, but still kind of want the government that allows a bit, may not agree with the tax rates that the progressives and the socialists want, and then a bit more moderate faction. So seemingly I could see like 5 political parties happening, being the socialist, the liberal center left of America, the center right moderate Republican, the Christian Republican, and the more so libertarian Republican, which would segment it in a more appropriate way for voters than just 2, if you have 5 choices. But I don't think they'll be without any political party. I think that's tough to do. It's tough to gain a following, tough to fundraise, tough to get your name out there. And if they were of no political party, then you'd see people kind of coalescing to get themselves in power, because they'd rather be in power and have small disagreements than neither of them be in power, which is kind of how the Republican Party formed. It swallowed up a bunch of smaller parties that are, the more Christian-leaning ones and the more libertarian ones kind of merged together. All right, and then as Ottoman Turk says, since atoms are made of the nucleus of orbiting electrons, and electrons can't touch since they're repulsive, you cannot touch, though you have enough radiation that you could touch. That's why I said if you ate 600 bananas, the amount of radiation you'd have would be the same as getting an X-ray. That's interesting. And then Jeremy asked, do you think the Democrats will abuse their power in the majority of the Senate, try to recognize the Supreme Court as a fair and unfair? I'm pretty sure that we've had different court sizes previously, so they have been expanded upon. I don't think they will. Abuse would mean, abuse would be using your power improperly. I don't think they'll do anything unconstitutional. I think that we have a good job of checks and balances, that things could go to the Supreme Court and be shut down if they try to do something not great. That's why you have, the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial. If the legislative branch, which is the Congress, which is made of the House of Representatives and the Senate, and the executive branch, the president, if they are blue, you still have a red judicial branch. I don't think that they will abuse their power. They might use it forcefully, but it would be constitutionally, I think. And I think there's enough checks and balances to hold them back. Obviously saying, Obama once said, elections have consequences. That has been used by the Republicans for the past 4 years to justify a lot of their actions, saying, as President Obama said, elections have consequences. If the American people do decide to put a majority of Democrats in the Senate, majority of Democrats in the House of Representatives, a Democratic president, that does show that they're not really abusing power as much as they are representing the beliefs of the American voter. I'm sure that the right will have objections to it and do things in their power to prevent it, but it wouldn't be an abuse. It would just be exercising their constitutional right. Um, while the two-party system is broken, it's beneficial. In a country with over 300 million people, we need to decide to move forward in a general direction. I'll have to disagree because a lot of the time things are in Senate are voted yes or no. Do you want to pass it or do you not want to pass the bill? But the rationale is not always the same. For example, libertarians want extraordinarily low tax rates. So if they had a new tax bill, the libertarian, if you had 2, 3 libertarians in Senate, would probably vote with the Republicans. But if you look at something like the death penalty, a libertarian would argue that the death penalty is not something that the government should have. The government should never have the right to take the life of a civilian. In the law, a death penalty would provide for the right of the government to take away the life of a person. So I think that when it comes to death penalty, the Democrats have always been against it for moral reasons. The Republicans have said we should go along with it. That's why they've executed 4 people this year federally. We have not had a federal execution in 17 years, but with a Republican executive branch, we have called for such. So a libertarian would vote with the with the Republican tax policies, but would probably vote with the death penalty of the Democrats. So third parties can provide very crucial swing votes. I do think that the most powerful people in Senate can be third parties. If you had, for say, 48 Democrats in Senate, 48 Republicans in Senate, you'd have 4 vacant spots because it's only 96 people. And if there were 4 libertarians, they'd be the swing vote on everything. They'd be the swing vote on taxes, death penalty, drug legalization. They'd be the most powerful faction. Despite being the smallest, they'd be the swing vote. And because they're their own third party, they don't have the same agenda as the Republicans or the Democrats. I don't think the two-party system is great. I do think that third, fourth, and even fifth party should be heard. The Green and Libertarian parties, I'm expecting to get multiple of millions of voters this year. They've been quiet, and we had 100 million people vote, 120 million people vote in 2016, but you still had about 4 million people go Libertarian. So you might get 2, 3, 4% of people not vote Democrat or Republican, and those voices matter. And there are millions of people that are being unheard but not having their representation. So I don't think two parties great. I think that a third, fourth party voices are important in this country. Now, in 1992, a man named Ross Perot ran for president. He ran, I think it was American Independent at that time, but he ran again in 96 of the Reform Party, which Donald Trump had run for in 2000. But basically what happened is at 92, he got 19 million people to support him. He didn't win any states, but he kind of took them for both parties. In 96, he ran again, got a few million votes, maybe 10 million. And the two parties said, this isn't great that we have some force pulling from our votes. So they've made it in the last 25 years that third parties can't get on the debate stage unless they have a certain amount of people polling for them. So they've really suppressed the voices of people who are not the two parties by coming together and pushing down the third parties. So I think all I'm saying, if a lot of people said they didn't like the Trump and Biden debate, if you had Andrew Yang or a third party candidate or someone who thought a little differently contesting both of them, now it's not only Trump saying that's a lie, Biden. Not only Biden says, will you shut up, man? It's a third voice saying both of you are wrong, or saying, no, I agree with Donald on this one. I agree with Biden on that one. If Americans had a third voice on stage, we'd think a lot differently. We're given yes or no. We're given, button heads, one side versus the other. You're not giving 3 different people. Third parties are good. Jeremy, he said, going off that, do you think there will be a new political party soon filled with young politicians to see it this way? So I think it's very likely. What would have to happen for that to occur is most likely a person from a party breaking off. So in America, we have about 500 people in our House of Representatives, and only one of them is not a Republican or a Democrat. And he is a libertarian. He was elected as a Republican. His name is Justin Amish. He's from Michigan. He got in some conflict with Donald Trump. He didn't want to be a part of Republicans anymore, and he switched. So he switched from Republican to Libertarian. He was not elected Libertarian, but he changed his views while in office. Bernie Sanders is probably the best example of that. Bernie Sanders has only been a Democrat twice in his life. That was 2015 and 2016, and 2019 and 2020 when he ran for president. He's always been an independent, which is why there are some independents in the Senate because of Bernie Sanders. So if a guy like Bernie, who was so charismatic and had supporters from the Democratic faction started his own party rather than not being aligned, you could see people flock to that. I think AOC is someone like that. I think that if the Democrats get power, it is very likely that they do have some form of new party. As you see, Trump talks about the Green New Deal, but Biden's plan is not the Green New Deal. But AOC does want the Green New Deal. It's possible that the American Progressive Party, once the Democrats receive power, you see a girl like AOC, who is so famous, 9, 10 million Instagram followers, says this is the new faction of the American Progressive. So I think it is possible. I think it's very possible. I think it would exist it would spur not from a young politician who wants to make a new party, but a politician who's already in a party breaking off. That's probably the more logical way because they have the following. Like if I want to become a politician, I don't think I'd run on, the Reform Party or the New American Party. I would, let's say, got elected as a Democrat or Republican and say, this is my new view. You voted me 3, 4, 5 times in, but I think this is the way we should change. So it'd be a charismatic leader. It wouldn't be young people forming a new party. It'd be a faction from a pre-existing party breaking off. All right, what else do we got here? What would the U.S. Be able to learn from third world countries? Now, the typical definition I learned of third world, we use as like developing countries. The way I learned it in an American history class is not aligned with either the Soviets or the Americans. The first world country are the NATO-aligned Americans, and the second world countries are the Soviet-aligned people, and the third world are the African countries, the South American countries didn't align with either. And this has morphed into a terminology to mean developing nation. Not sure what America could learn from developing nations, if that's what you're asking me. I think that Americans could learn from European nations and maybe some Asian nations, Japan, South Korea, even China could take some stuff in their playbook. Azar, trust me, Thomas, you don't want more political parties. I don't know if it's too bad. There's a study that basically shows if you have multiple parties, you always kind of coalesce into 2 parties. I don't know if I think that's bad. I think 3, 4 parties are good. If you look in Canada, you got your Liberal Party, the Liberals, and the Conservatives, if I'm not mistaken, and then you got the NDP, the New Democratic Party, and there might be 1 or 2 Bloc Quebec, which is the Canadian party, that make up it. I think I would want, like a 35%, a 35%, and then like a 15-15 representation when you have like 4 parties. That makes the most sense because if you look at American registration, Azar, you see that it's about like 35 to close to 40% Democrats, and then another like 30% Republican. So you're only at like 70%. There's still 30 people who aren't aligned, 30% of people who aren't aligned. And even within those 2 parties, I think the case for 3 parties or even 4 parties is fair. I don't think that's an issue. It wouldn't be like Israel when you have 10 different parties running for prime minister. But I think 4 parties is good. I think there's more than a voice between yes or no. I think there's people who will be yes, no, and then sometimes I agree with this one, sometimes I agree with that. Arvin, good to have you on. Hey, handsome fellow. Hey there, handsome fellow, to you too. All right, so Matthew says yes, but using that logic, if you're libertarian example, many times the existence of 2 parties held coalitions together to allow key legislation to be passed. Too many parties focus on accomplishing their ideals can lead to sacrificing the good for the perfect. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it's probably pretty unlikely that we do see a 3rd party or 4th party. This is more of a hypothetical, but I wouldn't see it be too much of an issue if they do come. Do you think the political compass is a good metric to represent political beliefs? There's a few other ones. I think there's a political axis or something like that. I've taken 1 or 2 other tests. I don't think it's a horrible way. I think it's pretty strong. I think it's a good metric. It's not perfect. It's not the ideal metric, but it does a good general sense that if you took that quiz and they put you on it and you discussed people who had very similar alignments, you'd find a lot more in common. So I do think it's a pretty good one. Ottoman Turks. Tom, if you have books, I would have all of them. I just love to hear you talk. Your voice is so simple. Thank you. I should start writing books for you guys to read. Um, that would be great. And yeah, Zara, I think the problem is too many parties is an issue, right? Saying that everyone needs representation, 20 parties is bad, 10 parties is bad. But 3.5 or two parties making up 70% of the representation, and then two or three making up the other 30%. I think that's very representative of people's beliefs, especially if you do a tier voting system. Because if you gave people the option to vote tiers and they could vote a ranked choice, and you go, let's say, Republican, Libertarian, Democrats, then you also see that there's factions of people that have a secondary choice that should also be heard. So tiered voting is important too. What do you think about job automation? I think the technology is there to replace a lot of jobs. I'm a person who graduated undergrad in marketing, a business major. The ways that you can do accounting, the ways that you can do things, crunching numbers, mathematics, equations, very easily done with automation, significantly better than our own skills. We already use calculators to, I guess, like automate our math skills. So the potential there to take over so many fields of expertise would be scary. Edward the fifth says, audiobooks, please. I enjoy hearing you speak. Thank you. I'll look into that. I guess what my YouTube videos kind of are. They're me speaking over, animations I make. How do you know so much? Reading, I read a good amount. I was keeping this book here, Sapiens, of course. I engage with a lot of you guys though too, because you guys comment. Azar obviously being my European plug for knowledge of that nature and what's going on in Portugal. So I hear from you guys. I get a lot of anecdotes. Anecdotes are sometimes considered a logical fallacy. Just because I tell you a story doesn't make it true or right, but it gives me some notion of the truth, some notion of what's going on, things I can look up, research myself. So this exchange of information is something that's great. That helps me a lot understand what you guys think, and it corrects what I'm thinking. If I say something, you bring up a valid point. So I think dialogue with other people and other mindsets is extraordinarily important. I believe in evolution, but I talk to people who believe in creationism all the time when I talk about evolution. I talk about Republican Party or Democrat Party, and I get the opposite. I'll talk about the Roman Empire to some fact I might know, and then someone comments and chimes in a fact that I didn't know, like Luce and Ottoman Turks will always bring up facts about Swiss history I didn't know, or how he was talking about how bananas can create radiation if you have 600 of them. So exchanging information with others is great. Epic Gamer, Far Cry 4 live stream when? LOL, I like that game. Have not played it. I played Far Cry 3 this summer. I own Far Cry 4. Never played it. We could do Far Cry 4 if you guys like it. Now, this sounds kind of weird. Or maybe not, because I have my Sapiens and I talk about evolution a lot, but Far Cry Primal is my favorite. Let me use the stone tools. Let me fight other tribes. The Winga. Oh my gosh, I love that idea. I know Azar is one of the greatest sources for information. Do you take into consideration I'm wrong half the time? We're humans. We don't know everything. We're wrong at times. I'm wrong half the time, 80% of the time, whatever it is. But the only way for me to know if I'm wrong or right is to be called out and corrected on it. So I take everything not with a grain of salt. I don't just dismiss it. I don't take it 100% proof when I hear it. But it changes the way I think because these ideas were never exposed to me. Banana Man is awesome, LOL. Stream Assassin's Creed. I can definitely do that soon. I'm doing it for Valhalla. I'm getting Valhalla. We're going to stream it when it comes out. And this way, I'll let you guys know how I feel about it, my impressions, what you guys feel about it. Is it worth the money? Is it not? I think that whether or not you liked Assassin's Creed, whether or not you liked Odyssey, Origins, the storyline, whatever, I think they make quality games. I think that Odyssey may not have been the traditional Assassin's Creed game. Some of it was mixed with mythology, whatever, but a gigantic map, a lot of possibilities, a lot of cool historical figures are thrown in there. Herodotus, I think Hippocrates was there. Pythagoras, Pythagoras. They just tossed in a bunch of names. Maybe even Socrates was there, if I didn't say that. Alcibiades was there. So you get a bunch of people, and you get to learn from that. So I think Assassin's Creed is fun, and I think I want to show you guys Valhalla. Do you think that if Nick, its brother, could have prevented the fall of the Russian Empire? Tsar Nicholas's brother? I am not too sure what could happen. Tsar Nicholas was one of the richest men of all time. He owned pretty much all the land in Europe as the Tsar. He was a part of the Romanov family. They ruled for 300 years in Russia, and was put to an end with a bloody massacre of him and his family, and led to a Russian Revolution and to communist Russia. So after 300 years of one family ruling, the Russians had enough, and Lenin brought in Leninism and communism into the country. How would you try to educate an ignorant person about politics? A simple way I explain it is that there are political ideologies, and they really don't change too much if you describe something like conservatism or progressivism, but the parties themselves change along that spectrum. So while conservatism is a belief of certain views, the Republicans hold conservative values. But for example, gay marriage was not illegal federally to the United States in 2015. Republicans fought to push for gay legislation. Once it became legal, there's not too many factions of people who are against it. So the Republican Party was here on the issue, and they shifted here on the issue. So what you should explain is the current policies that these group of people stand for. So to explain something like Republican in America, you'd say this party wants to have deregulation. They want to have less government involvement in affairs of the economy. They want to tax you less so you can spend more of your own money. And then the converse side, the opposite, is the Democrats. And you could say this party wants to increase taxes on certain groups of people as they lay out in their tax plan. And you could bring up Bernie's tax plan or Biden's tax plan and say that they want to hike up the percentage that certain people pay that would go to the government, and they'd use this new form of tax revenue, tax money from the people, to provide other services. They might expand healthcare. That's why they talk about free healthcare. They might want to have, make college free. They want to fund college through the American people's money. So explain to them the point of view these people carry, and say this is what they stand for. This is what the other side stands for, and this is how they try to achieve those goals. There's a lot of propaganda from both sides as they want to push their own agenda. They want to be in charge. They want their way. Trump will say something along the lines of calling Kamala Harris a communist, which is a person who wants to seize the means of production, which wants to make private property not exist anymore. By no means does she represent that ideology. By no means does she call for getting rid of private ownership of your own business and having the government take it over. So it's important to point out what they believe in and what methods they try to do to achieve that in a polite way. Because just resulting to calling one side a communist is not necessarily the smartest way to engage in politics, and it gives one side the notion that they are communists. So it's not great. Can you give us a 2021 prediction, Mr. Nostradamus? I am not a predictor. I'm History University. I'm looking at the past, not the future here. And then we make very good strides with something like SpaceX or Blue Origin or Virgin Galactic or whatever the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, are working on with Japan for their rockets. I think we see some very cool discoveries in space in 2021, and not a human Mars landing, but some people are going to be landing on Mars, I think, next year, and that's going to be cool. We talk about the moon landing. Zach, the first man space on the moon. We talk about the moon landing. My generation didn't have a moon landing because that was in 1969 the first time, but I think we'll have a Mars landing, and that could be done by the end of the 2020s. That's my decade prediction. Same way Kennedy predicted putting a man on the moon in the 60s. I'm predicting man on Mars this generation. Do you think anyone could have predicted that the U.S. would pull ahead in the space race as Russia had sent the first man to the moon? Good question. So America was ahead in the space race. Russia was. Russia had the first animal in space. They had the first human in space, Yuri Gagarin. They had the first satellite in space called Sputnik. They had Sputnik 2, which was put in, I believe, before an American satellite. They had the first woman in space. So they were achieving a lot of things before the Americans. But the Americans put a man on the moon first and kind of declared that they won the space race. And pretty much as soon as Neil landed on the moon, and Nixon was like, "We're gonna cut spending on NASA. We already spent a lot of money here." Why I think it was very possible the Americans passed the Russians. I was watching the 1960 debate between Nixon and Kennedy points out multiple times the GDP of Russia is 44% of the American GDP. The Russians did not have the infrastructure that the Americans had before Kennedy took office under Eisenhower. The highest tax rate was 90%. So Americans paid a lot more taxes. Kennedy slashed it to 50. Now we're below 40 today. So Americans were making more money, had more infrastructure, were not destroyed by the Germans in the war. The Germans destroyed a lot of Russian cities and Russian people and Russian lives. So the Americans had the infrastructure, they had the money coming in, they were taxing a good amount, they were funding it to a higher degree because they had more money to. So I think that some people could look at that and be like, they did have the money, the means to do so. Now this was all done by German scientists from World War II. The leading person of the Soviet space program was a German scientist of the Nazi Party, and same thing with American. The guy who basically founded NASA, he founded an agency before it turned into NASA, was Werner von Braun. Werner von Braun was a Nazi scientist, and something called Operation Paperclip. This was an operation when the Americans funded bringing over German scientists after World War II and implementing them into American use, mainly for building missiles, but Werner von Braun always wanted to get to the moon, and that's what he did. And it's a big deal. People were questioning, is this the guy we want ahead of our missile program, a former Nazi? And Werner von Braun took his oath of an American citizen, became an American citizen. The people saw his dedication to the country, and he helped put a man on the moon. So I do think at some point it became more likely that that the Americans would get to the moon before the Russians because of the funding that they had and the Russians lacked. Tell us about the future. I can't. I do have a friend over at Future University on Instagram that is the sequel to History University. I work in close collaboration of Future University as I am History University. Do you think World War III will be fought conventionally or with nuclear weapons? I think a thing like the UN, the idea of the EU, the idea of NATO, are trying to prevent a third world war. The First World War was called the Great War before they got the name World War II. I think that it's probably fair to call it, World War I was supposed to be called the war to end all wars, and it clearly wasn't. But I think World War II is meant to be the war to end all global wars. Obviously, tremendous amount of conflicts have occurred since World War II. Vietnam for America, Korea for America, Iraq for America, Afghanistan for America. But obviously the Iran-Iraq War was probably one of the more miserable wars of the 20th century, which occurred after World War II. So I don't know if there will be nuclear weapons. I think there's a strong effort on something called MAD, M-A-D, mutually assured destruction. For some reason, Boston gets nuked by a bomb, by the Russians will say, Moscow would then be nuked. It'd be mutually, as both sides will agree, we'll destroy you if you nuke one of our cities. So that concept of MAD, that your both will be destroyed, your civilizations will both be in shambles if you go at us, prevents people from using nuclear weapons. Light mode, this dark mode, that the only mode I know is sicko mode. Are you pro-Poland or pro-Australia? If you say neither, you're wrong. I'm American, and Poland has the highest approval rating of the United States of any country in the world today, if I'm not mistaken. I'll look that up right now. Do a quick Google search. Countries with highest view of America. Let's see this. This is from the Pew Research Center, posted pretty recently. It's kind of hard to dig up. They're using a lot of different graphs. But it does look like 70% of Poles, or people from Poland, have a positive view. It looks like Israel might be the highest, actually. But Poland, I believe, is the highest European nation of American approval. I don't know what goes on too much in Poland. I know they are Catholic by nature, with probably 90% of them being Catholic. I know they are more conservative-leaning people, as America is also a very conservative-leaning nation. So the polls are supportive of my country. And I don't know if I have to draw a distinction between Australia and Poland. Australia seems like a great place. It really does. It seems like a cool place. Their animal life seems amazing. They have Aboriginals there. The natives, I have heard the treatment of the native Aboriginals are not of a good standard. So I'm sad to hear that they have second-class citizens in a nation that is considered very democratic, and probably an equal society, but I don't think they treat people as evenly. I have ran the stream for 50 minutes so far. I think that's amazing. Amazing that I've had double-digit people in here watching. I think that's awesome. I think we'll wrap up shortly. I ran a stream earlier today. Ottoman Turks was there on Instagram. I ran that for an hour. But I'll take one or two more questions before wrapping up tonight, because it's been a pleasure to do the stream. And I didn't know it would take me 50 minutes so quickly. It feels like it's been 5. Pro-human. Yes, humanism is a good philosophy to put the human at the center focus of morality, rather than any principle per se. Whereas some put the individual human and the individual right over the collective right. Putting humanity first is not a bad idea. If I remember correctly, the United States have been at peace for 16 years out of 240 of being an independent country. Not sure if I can verify that off the top of my head. I mean, it's been pretty much continuous since World War II, for sure. I'm not really sure what happened in between World War I and World War II exactly, during the Great Depression and before that. It seems a little low. 16 years. Now I'm sure it might be like 35 years, but 16 seems a little odd. But obviously, 1812, the Americans had the war with the British. 1836, American Civil War. I feel like trying to think of what was going on in between 1865 and 1896, between the Spanish-American War and the American Civil War. I could see 16 years of peace since 1900, if I'm being honest. Have you read any Ben McIntyre books? I have not. Does anyone here want to know about astronomy? Sure. The Blank Comedy Show. Yes, good to have you on the Blank Comedy Show. Always a pleasure to have you guys on. But yes, what about astronomy do we want to talk about, Ottoman Turks? Tell me about it. Dígame, as they say in Spanish, Español. Well, what do you think of kings and / queens that were coronated young? It is interesting when you make your head of state a 4-year-old. Louis XIV, the Sun King, ruled for 70 plus years. It only really happens if you're made king at like 5. So I think it was just a different sentiment with the divine right of kings. The divine right of kings, divine referring to divinity or a god, and the right for those people to rule. It was believed that monarchs had the divine right from God to rule over people or their subjects, and Louis was doing that for 70 years. I'm not educated in American history, honestly. So I don't think you're too off, though, with that stat. I do want to look it up after the stream. Isabella II was 3 when she was coronated. That is young. 3-year-old queen. How long was America at peace for? 17 years of peace here since its birth. This is warhistory.com or warhistoryonline.com. What are the years they're giving me? So during the period 1935 to 1940, which is in between 2 world wars, U.S. focused on domestic policy to shore up nation after the Great Depression. Congress and the American people just did not want to get involved in the national stage. That's 5 years. From isolation to Pax Americana. That is crazy. The nation, 1783, a victory of the British. However, the war continued to altercation of the Native Americans. There you go. Yeah, that makes sense. We started with 13 colonies on the east coast of America, and we got all the way to the west coast. Took conflict to get that. It wasn't free real estate; it was stolen real estate. Um, so that would make sense for the continuous combat. And we didn't make Hawaii a state until the 1950s, if I'm not mistaken. Hawaii and Alaska. There were territories previously, but it just shows that we were working for close to 200 years on expanding. So we ran into a lot of people. That was good. All right, Zach, thank you for having me on. I'm glad that you're on at 2 a.m. It's always a pleasure to have you guys engage. And it was right. It was 17 years, not 16, but that is so close that I believe that is just a great way of phrasing it. I started reading American history on your videos. Were a great help. Thank you. Thank you for liking the Halloween one, Blank Comedy Show. If you guys have things that you want me to talk about, I will. I will talk about more things. Edward V says that Mary, Queen of Scots, was 6 days old when she became queen. That's insane. Was she James's daughter? Azar, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. It was a quick expansion, for sure. If you've heard of it, do you believe assassinations of Emperor Alexios? I do not. I have not heard of that. There's a planet that rains glass sideways. I'm not gonna doubt you, Luce. No matter how ridiculous that sounded, I'm never gonna think that you're wrong. Look at some of these questions that I skipped over before. Jupiter has 67 moons. Huge gravitational orbit. It's actually very hard to comprehend the size of those planets. They're gigantic. Gas giants, they're called. If everyone in NYC votes one way and everyone in the rest of the states vote which way the electoral college go, you'll go to the state. I believe the population of NYC is around 8.5 million, and the state's around 20. So that'd be 12 to 8 million, and it would be a pretty solid margin for the opposite way. Majority of counties in New York vote red, but NYC is a huge part of the population. They tend to go blue. And even when the counties vote 60, 70% red, they're still a 30% Democrat. So it ends up turning out a very blue state overall, as cities tend to be more Democratic leaning. Every planet in the solar system can fit inside Jupiter. That was insane to hear. That is insane. Overall, it's interesting. Alexios had a 12-year-old wife by the time he was murdered at 14. Wow. For a reason that still confuses me. I don't know how to say that Andronikos married Alexios' wife. I haven't looked into that. Thank you for informing me about it. I did not know. I am going to hop off now. It has been a good hour. I'm glad that 17 of you guys are still on the stream. I'm going to do these more often on YouTube rather than on Instagram. And the tools are better here than they were on Instagram for this sort of nature, as I can archive it, post it up. You guys can look at it again. So thank you guys for hopping on. I want to say all of you guys, it's been a pleasure. It's been 59 minutes. Have a good evening. My DMs are always open if you want to talk to me. I'll see you guys soon.